Paul, what are some key things you're going to be watching for tonight or for tomorrow for the debate?
So I'm interested in hearing how the two candidates speak in general, right? So the form itself is going to be quite interesting. If we remember back to the first debate in 2020, it was actually a fairly raucous affair, right? And both candidates this time have actually crafted a debate scenario that's outside of the formal presidential commission mechanism that's generally used to regulate presidential debates. So I'm interested to see what the feel of the debate is going to be and how the two candidates are going to approach it. Is CNN going to cut off microphones? Are they going to ensure that questions are answered? How hot is it going to be? Also, there are only two candidates on the stage. There are some who thought that it was possible that Robert Kennedy Jr. could have made the debate stage. He did not. So it is going to be Democrat versus Republican discussion. So this is only two parties that are involved, despite the fact that you have a lot of Americans right now that are considering third party options. So I'm interested in the form of the discussion and how the moderators kind of regulate the debate between the two candidates. There are also different issues that I think each candidate is going to want to talk about more and play to their strengths, if you will. Whereas I think that there are certain vulnerabilities that both Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden are going to want to exploit
Yeah.
for the campaign.
How much do you think it'll be taking shots at each other on policy versus taking shots on each other on personal matters?
I think both candidates are going to want to sneak in more ad hominem attacks. I would be surprised, for instance, if Joe Biden doesn't make mention about former President Trump's legal troubles. I would also be surprised if former President Trump doesn't make comments pertaining to Joe Biden's age or the fact that he's having to wither criticisms, even within his own party, about a variety of policy issues. So I think this will be the balance within the debate. You have voters that want to learn more about the key differences between these two individuals. At the same time, I think both President Trump and President Biden are going to want to provide these kind of personal digs at one another to demonstrate that, you know, their opponent is not fit for the position.
Right. Based off of numerous polls and metrics, this election really looks razor thin right now.
Yeah.
How much do you think this debate and the next debate could
Mm.
actually have an impact in moving the needle one way or another?
On the one hand, we don't have as many debates as some people want to see, and we're also months away from the general election in November. Right? We have not even had the Republican National Convention or the Democratic National Convention. We are really far out from November. There's also a question about the impact of debates on voter behavior. Many people know how they feel about Donald Trump, and many people know how they feel about Joe Biden. So, how many independents are really watching, and how many undecided voters are really watching versus diehard Republicans and diehard Democrats that are going to tune in to see how their candidate performs? I do think both camps are going to try to find those sound bites that then they can use in advertising across battleground states. So there is a possibility that a gaffe here or a great statement there could have a later impact in key states.
Yeah. Do you think no crowd will have an impact on either candidate?
Yes, I think many voters like the town hall atmosphere of some presidential debates and the opportunity to actually see candidates stand up, walk around, answer questions on the spot from people. That's not what we're going to be seeing in this debate, right? We are going to have two moderators who are offering questions to the candidates in a very kind of neutral environment. We're not going to hear boos. We're not going to hear applause. I do think that each of the candidates relates to an audience environment differently. I think, for instance, former President Trump likes to have these kind of big, bold rallies and say things that help his supporters and kind of rally his supporters, but also say things that he believes knocks his opponent who's on the stage. So I think the lack of an audience is going to be felt. That's for sure.
What do you think are some of a couple of key policy issues both candidates will want to touch on?
So I would be surprised if issues like abortion don't pop up, especially because we're seeing the Democratic Party spend a lot of money on advertising on this topic. We've also had abortion issues that have popped up in federal courts ever since the Dobbs decision was decided. So I think abortion is going to come up. Inflation is going to be a big one. I would be surprised if former President Trump does not try to hammer away at the cost of gas and the cost of groceries and try to compare the economic environment of today versus the economic environment when he was president of the United States. I'm really interested to see how much foreign policy talk there's going to be, right? The extent to which we're going to see question after question about Gaza and about Ukraine. Right now, for instance, President Biden is receiving a lot of criticism from the left flank of his party about how the administration has handled the war in Gaza. I'm also interested to see how President Trump, former President Trump, addresses the issue of Ukraine, seeing as a large faction within his party actually wants to see us kind of pull back from more direct involvement in that region.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to touch on in terms of what would be a successful night for each candidate?
I think questions of age are still plaguing President Biden. It's something that people noted leading up to his State of the Union address, just how important it was for him to seem very vibrant, very active, very youthful, in fact. I think that people are going to be interested to see the amount of effort and energy he has on the debate stage. I think for President Trump, people are going to want to hear how he addresses ongoing legal proceedings, in addition to proceedings that have already wrapped up. So those are two issues that I think people are going to want to tune in for, and I'm interested to see how each camp addresses them. So for President Biden, if he comes away from the debate stage and he looks the way he did when he was running for president in 2008, I think his camp will be happy. And if President Trump, former President Trump, is able to come away from the debate handling some of these criminal questions pertaining to criminal proceedings against him in a manner that doesn't dissuade voters, doesn't dissuade, say, Nikki Haley supporters from the primary race from voting for him, I think he'll be happy as well.
Paul, are you able to provide us any insight on just how much prep goes into these two candidates preparing for these?
There are some great stories and interesting kind of cottage industry of literature surrounding debate preparations. We've even seen kind of night and day approaches between the parties over the past 20 to 30 years. We've seen candidates that are quite underwhelming in their first debate that then really come out swinging during their second debate. So because we only have two debates here, I think there's going to be more pressure on the candidates to not have an underwhelming debate, right? I'm thinking, for instance, of how many social scientists and even the American public viewed the first presidential debate in 2000 between George W. Bush and Al Gore versus how Bush then kind of improved his performance over time in the debates. I don't think that either candidate here can afford to have a lackluster approach because we only have two debates, and because, as you stated earlier, we're looking at razor thin margins between these two candidates. A big gaffe, something that the opposing party can just hammer away on in the next 3-4 months, in advertisement after advertisement, could be the death knell for a campaign. So I do think that there's heightened pressure here, and There's been some great reporting in recent years about the kind of intense debate preparations that candidates are now having to undergo.
Do you have any analytics or numbers of historical data that show how many percentage points a debate can sway something? Because I know there's a lot of data in terms of like how much does a debate actually impact the race.
Hmm. So here, this seems a bit more qualitative and also subjective, right? For those that are on the fence or slightly leaning towards a candidate, if they see a candidate that then does well, that kind of confirms their initial assumptions and views of that candidate. So they do go out to vote for that individual. So that's harder to measure sometimes. I suppose what both candidates are worried about in the weeks after this debate is kind of voter kind of depression, right? Or to put it slightly differently, voters who were on the fence and then witnessed this candidate's performance and said, okay, I'm just not going to vote. I'll just stay home. Right? There were more than 100 million eligible voters in 2016 that did not vote for the president. Right. So I suppose this is a concern for each camp, which is when you have a very close race, it's not just about mobilizing your supporters, it's also about ensuring that people go out to vote, right? You're trying to engage the undecideds, you're trying to organize and mobilize your supporters, and you're trying to ensure that people are actually going. People who support you are going out to vote. So if you have an example, say in 2016, where a large number of traditional Democrats just say, I'm not going to vote, or I'll leave kind of the presidential tag, I'll leave that open and I'll just vote down ballot for who I like, right? That's a concern for the candidates. So they can't have such a weak performance here and then in the subsequent debate that people within their own party say, you know what, I was going to vote, but now I'm just not going to vote at all. So that's a concern. You don't need complete party loyalists to kind of usher you in the White House, but you do at least need votes, right? Even if it's a somewhat unenthusiastic vote.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add, Paul?
Nope.
Okay, awesome. You're the best. Thank you so much.
Nope.
We'll see
No
you
worries.
Monday. Are you going to be at the station on Monday?
I think so. I'll
Okay.
have to look. I'll have to
Well, if you
check.
are, I'll see you then.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.